Hello, I'm Jana, and welcome back to the Crafty Corner. Today, I'm here to tell you about the new Funkie Junkie Challenge over at the Funkie Junkie Blog. We're going to be playing to the theme of Fall Gratitude. This challenge is open from October 6th through October 19th, and we are greatly looking forward to seeing all of your challenge entries. Don't forget, you can play along over at Instagram as well. Just hashtag Funkie Junkie Challenge and tell us in the description what the challenges you're entering for. Today, I'm going to be doing a card tutorial, and we're going to be playing with Distress inks, Distress glazes, and some Distress crayon. For the full list of supplies, go ahead and pause. All right, let's head over to the Crafty Corner. Today we're working on Fall Gratitude, and I've decided to create a shaker card. We're going to be starting off with some Distress inks, Mustard Seed, Crackling Campfire Oxide, Rusty Hinge Oxide, and Carved Pumpkin. To make this background, I'm going to be using some Distress Heavy Mixed Media White cardstock. And we're going to start by smushing down our inks on our craft mat. I decided to go with some bright fall colors to create a inky backdrop. Once we have all of our inks down, I'm going to be grabbing my Distress Spray Mister and giving a few quick squeezes onto the mat. Once I see that I've got some good water droplets beading up on the mat, I'm going to be taking my substrate and smushing it right into the ink, giving it a little press and lifting up. Ooh, I am loving the colors. They are bright and drippy. So I'm going to move the cardstock around just a little bit to get the ink flowing and then go in with the heat tool. Now that the cardstock is nice and dry, I'm going to go back in and dip into the ink. Here I'm going to be just lightly tapping the cardstock to pick up some of the smaller droplets of ink. As we can see, we're getting little splatters all over our substrate. That's looking good. So I want to move the ink around a little bit, so I'm going to be spritzing with the Distress Spray Mister to get a little bit more movement. And by adding water, it's also going to help activate the oxides. All right, let's dry this off and see how it looks. Okay, now just for a little cleanup, I'm going to take my cloth and quickly wipe off the media mat because I need to start another layer. Okay, so the background looks really good, but I want to add some drip drops on here before proceeding to the next step. So I will slowly squeeze the trigger on the mister and get some lovely droplets going. Once I'm happy, then we'll bring back the heat tool. Now that our background is dry, I wanted to add some iced spruce. The background is super bright. It needs to get cooled down just a little bit, and iced spruce oxide is just the color for that. So we're going to spritz, get some nice water droplets going, and I'm going to gently tap on the iced spruce oxide. I want to go for little splatters on this card, not a big giant smear. And now we're going to just dry that off and see what that gets us. Okay, not bad, but I'm going to go in for a second dip. We're going to try to pick up some more of the little dots still on the mat. Okay, I'm starting to feel pretty happy with this, so let's go ahead and dry it off. Now, there's our finished background with some cool ice spruce. Next, I'm going to be pulling out this leaf impresslet, and I've already die cut a few of these beech leaves. They have fantastic texture, and these are going to be some of our embellishments for this card. For the embellishment on these leaves, we're going to be using one of my favorite Tim Holtz techniques, using Distress glazes and Distress crayons to add some color to these leaves. These leaves were cut from Distress Mixed Media Heavy Stock, and we're going to be using some embossing ink now. I'm going to be using the dabber and the larger brush pen. For color, I'm going to be using several of the Distress embossing glazes. The embossing glazes are going to give us this wonderful shine and add some contrast. But first, let's go ahead and apply our embossing ink. For the little leaf, I'm going to be using the brush. I find that the brush is a lot easier for smaller objects, and it allows you to make sure you have great coverage with the embossing ink. Now that the ink is on there, I'm going to hold this up to the camera and tilt it to make sure that we've got good coverage. As you can see, the leaf is shiny. If there were any spots that weren't shiny, I might go back and add the ink. Now onto the embossing dabber. I'm going to jump start it by tapping it on the mat and then gently rubbing it onto the larger leaf. I'm not squeezing the bottle because if I did, the dabber has a tendency to explode and get very messy. But just applying light pressure and dabbing, we're going to get great inky coverage on the leaf. And again, I'm tilting it to make sure that I haven't missed any spots. And I will do the same thing on the second large leaf. Now I'm going to pull in a piece of scrap paper to catch the embossing powder. Here I'm spreading out my leaves and I'm grabbing the Distress Embossing Glazes. Today we're going to be using Fried Brick and Crackling Campfire. These are going to be some great bright leafy colors. So I'm just going to open both of these jars and set them on my scrap paper. Then I'm going to go in with my fingers and just take a little pinch and gently sprinkle these powders over the leaves. I don't really have any particular pattern in mind. These are just going to be little bits of random application of color. They're leaves, so each one gets to be a little bit different. Okay, setting aside the fried brick, now let's go ahead and dip into the Crackling Campfire. And again, I'm just taking a little bit of the powder, pinching it, and sprinkling it gently over the leaf. Okay, the leaves are looking pretty good. Now I'm just going to take these off the scrap paper and tap the back of the leaf to make sure that the powder is spread out, but then I'm going to flick just a little bit on the back to remove some of the powder because I don't want perfect coverage on these leaves. I want them to have a more of the distressed look. So by flicking on the back, it removes some of the powder in random spots. This is going to work to our advantage later on when we pull in some distress crayons. All right, let's move these leaves off of the paper and get ready to emboss. For embossing, I'm going to be using some of the Sizzix Tim Holtz squeezers and an embossing gun. To make sure that I'm not getting my fingers too close to the heat, I like to use the squeezers to help me out. All right, here are the leaves. Now for some distress crayon. We're going to be using mustard seed and carved pumpkin. Okay, let's start with the smallest leaf. To start with, I'm going to be using some of the mustard seed. I'm going to scribble that onto the leaf and then gently rub it in with my finger. The areas where the embossing powder did not stick are going to nicely absorb the distress crayon. And we'll do the same to the larger leaf. I'm just scribbling randomly and then smooshing it in with my finger. I'm loving the color combination. The yellow and the Crackling Campfire are nice complementary colors. Next, I'm going to be adding some of the carved pumpkin distress crayon. And again, I'm just going to scribble a little bit on and smush it in with my finger. Now I'm trying to focus on the spots that don't have any distress crayon yet, but I'm also trying to overlap a little bit with the mustard seed to give these leaves a bit of a more natural gradient. I think it's pretty cool the way the distress glaze acts as a resist, and if we want that color to show up even more, I can go in later and wipe off the leaf with a paper towel, and that will reveal even more of the distress glaze color that might have been covered up with the distress crayon. Okay, now it's time to start working on the shaker card component of this project. I've got my background already, and I have some packaging cellophane left over from a stamp set that I've recently got. We're going to be using this to create a shaker pouch. I'm going to start by cutting along one side of the plastic with some of my tonic Tim Holtz scissors. By cutting along the side, this is going to allow me to wrap the plastic around the card base. And we're going to cut off the top seam. Good. Now let's bring in the card base. With the card base, I'm going to slip that onto the inside, and there's some adhesive already on the plastic, so I'm going to flip that part up and press it down onto the card back. Then I'm going to cut off this other half of the plastic. This can be saved for later to make another shaker card. Now I'm going to rotate the card to the right, and I'm going to grab my ATG gun, and we're going to add some adhesive to the back of this card. This is going to be so I can seal the plastic pouch so that we can keep all of our little shaker bits in one spot. I'm going to run a couple of lines of the adhesive on the back of the card. Then I'm going to take the edge of the plastic and fold it up and over. Press it firmly to make sure that there's a good seal, and crease the plastic. Then we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Run a few strips of ATG tape and then flip the plastic over, forming a seal and a tight crease. All right, and that gives us the start of our shaker pocket. Now I have a few pieces of extra plastic on the back, and I'm going to gently snip those off with the scissors just to cut down on the bulkiness of this little packet. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we're just going to turn the card a little bit, and we're going to trim some of the extra plastic off of the top. I'm leaving myself about 1.5 inches so that I'll have plenty to fold over and completely seal the packet. Now I need to crease the top down just to make sure I have my line when I'm ready to seal. And I'm going to be next taking an anti-static pouch and slipping that into the entire packet. I'm going to rub that on the interior, and it's going to cut down on some of the static. I'm going to be adding glitter, so I don't want all of the glitter to cling to the plastic when the card gets shaken. Okay, now just opening up the packet just a little bit, it is time to add some sparkly bits. I've got a mix of red and maroon sequins, and I'm also going to be using some of the new Distress Glitter Tinsel. This is a fantastic color, and it's even perfect for fall. So we're going to take a little spoonful of that and shake that into the pocket. I'm using about half a spoon's worth. Then we'll just put the rest back into the jar and set that aside. Okay. Now it's time to seal up the packet. So we're just going to shake the shakety bits down into the bottom, and then we're going to seal up the top. I'm going to add a few strips of the ATG tape, and then firmly press the remaining plastic onto the back. But before, I'm going to cut off the corners just so I don't have too much bulk on the back of this card. Okay, this is all nicely sealed now. So we're going to flip it over, give it a quick shake, make sure that we don't have any leaks. And that is looking pretty good. The glitter is moving freely and not clumping, so the anti-static pouch has done its job, and the shakety bits are moving nicely. Now on to the fun part. We're going to be cutting up these leaves and sticking them onto the front of the card to create a kind of flame. I had also made a few of these leaves off camera. Some of them have some fossilized amber on them and a touch of walnut stain distress crayon. So to put these leaves on here, I'm going to be popping them up with some foam squares. I'm going to use 2 or 1 foam squares to stick onto the back of the leaves and attach them to the card front. I like using the foam squares because it adds a little bit more dimension to an otherwise flat card. So we'll just peel off the backings and stick it onto the card. I'm not worrying about the overhang right now. I just want to get the majority of my leaves placed, and then I'll go back and trim off some of the extra pieces. So for putting the leaves on, I'm doing a bit of a random pattern, mixing and matching whole leaves, partial leaves, and some of the little leaves. Now, the nice thing about the foam squares is that even if I place something and I don't quite like where it's placed, it's going to be really easy to peel off the plastic and move it. So I've got plenty of time to experiment with the placement of the leaves and keep moving them until I'm satisfied. Okay, I'm liking the placement of these leaves so far, so I'm going to go ahead and start trimming off the overhanging bits. This will just neaten up the card a little bit and give me some smaller pieces to play with if I need little pieces for filler around the frame that I'm creating. Now it's time to add our sentiment. I die cut these letters from the Tim Holtz paper pack number 1, and I used the die set alphanumeric stretch, both the upper and the lower case. Before die cutting, I applied some sticky back adhesive to the back of the paper so that these would be easy stickers to just peel and stick when I was ready to add the sentiment. So we're going to tuck these letters in behind and around the leaves to add our sentiment. And here is our finished shaker card. The shakety bits are shaking nicely in the backdrop, and we can clearly see the bold sentiment surrounded by leaves. I hope you've enjoyed this little card making project. If you'd like written instructions, go ahead and head over to my blog. I'll leave the link down in the description. And don't forget, you too can play along to the theme of fall gratitude over at the Funkie Junkie Blog or on Instagram. All details for entering the Funkie Junkie Challenge are linked down below. And until next time, happy crafting!